-1 across the contents, it won't change the numbers, but it will change all the signs, just like if I can multiply by -3, it changes all the signs. Not a big deal, okay? Addition of matrix. First restriction, you cannot add matrices unless they are exactly the same size. Just like I can't add variables unless they're exactly the same variable. Oh, well, they can have a coefficient on them, but I can't add x's and y's. I got to add x's to x's. And I got to add z's to z's and so on down the line. So this matrix requires that you recognize, does it look exactly the same as this matrix does? Is it the same size? What size is this? 2 by 3. What size is this? 2 by 3. Can a 2 by 3 be added to a 2 by 3? And what size will the result be? 2 by 3, not 4 by 6. Okay, so you're not adding the indexes of the problem in there, you're adding those individual cells. So your intermediate step would say, oh, I'm going to add 4 to 5. I'm going to add 2 to 4. I'm going to add -3 to a -1. I'm going to add -1 to a -1. I'm going to add 3 to 2. I'm going to add -5 to 7. This would be your intermediate step if the question said include the intermediate step, show support, show the steps you got there. I could put those two things in the calculator, let the calculator do the work for me. If you ever do anything by hand, it's a wise idea to check it on the calculator so that you don't get caught short. Now, the nice thing about matrices is when they make you put these cells in individually, they give you a point for each one of them. So if you miscopied just one of the cells, you get 5 points instead of the 6 points for that problem. If they had you put in individual cells. If they had you type the whole matrix from scratch, it's either all right or all wrong. We haven't had to type a whole matrix from scratch. All the matrices we've typed in before, on the augmented matrices, they gave us the matrix layout and we just filled in cells. But that's going to change in this particular case. So this middle step, or the intermediate step, if you will, might be what you'd be asked for to put on the test, and that would be something you probably would include on the test just to make sure that you're showing me what your plan of attack happens to be. Addition is pretty straightforward. Subtraction's not bad either, but subtraction we got to be careful about. Addition, when we change the order of the ingredients, it still gives us the same result, doesn't it? 7 plus 2 is the same or different than 2 plus 7? The same. So rearranging the parts of the addition problem doesn't change anything. But subtraction, big difference. 7 minus 2, not the same thing as 2 minus 7. So pay attention to the order in which you put your ingredients in if you're using the calculator as well as if you're using by hand. So subtraction's a little bit funnier. So up here, if asked to show your steps in the problem, would we be able to defend A plus B? What would your intermediate step look like? 3 is going to be added to 4. -1 is going to be added to -3. 6 is going to be added to a -2. And that could have been, if you wanted to, you could have written 6 minus 2. Same thing, okay? And then 4 plus a -1, or you could have written 4 minus 1 in there. And your end result would then be a value which would have upper left-hand cell of 7, upper right-hand cell of -4, lower left-hand cell 4, lower right-hand cell 3. What if it says A minus B? 3 minus 4, -1 minus a -3. Now you got to be careful because you're going to have to fight through some signs if you're doing it by hand. But that's not that bad. We're kind of used to fighting with signs anyhow. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. Positive 6 now is going to be subtracting a -2. And positive 4 is going to be subtracting a -1. So that would be our intermediate step, leaving us what in the upper left-hand cell? -1, upper right-hand cell. Now that's actually a -1 plus 3, so we've got a 2 now. And this is a 6 plus 2, so now we have an 8. And here is a 4 plus 1, so we have a 5. Doesn't look like brain surgery, does it? If it has to do it by hand, you should be able to do it by hand then, right? Could we do the more complicated operation? I would expect us to have 2 times b and then subtract a. Well, 2 times 4 would give us a value of 8, and now we're subtracting 3. 2 times a -3 would give us a -6, and now we're subtracting a -1. 2 times -2 would give us a -4, and we're subtracting a 6 from that. And then 2 times a -1, and we're subtracting a value of 4 from that. We may be able to do that work in our head. If it takes you an extra middle step or in-between step to be able to handle that, then that's fine. But this is your support for the exercise. Well, what if I just go right to the answer? Then the question is, did they say show the intermediate step? If they said yes and you didn't do it, it's wrong. If it didn't say, then do whatever you want. You don't have to do it by hand, you can do it on the calculator. But I can certainly check it on the calculator. Upper left-hand cell, 5. Upper right-hand cell, -6 plus 1, -5. Lower left-hand cell, -10. Lower right-hand cell, -2 minus 4, -6. Could I get the calculator to do that? Absolutely, but now I'm going to have to put something in both matrix A and in matrix B, aren't I? So is that possibly why when we looked at this, that when we went to the matrix menu, that whoever was in this class before using this calculator had already filled up a second matrix with something? But probably because they did an addition problem in there. So let's double check this last one that we did, letting the calculator do the work, which is not a bad idea. It doesn't take you that long to do and would be a good idea if you don't want to get penalized for stupid mistakes, for intelligence challenge mistakes. Okay, so matrix A wants to be a 2 by 2, and matrix A has to hold the values of 3, -1, 6, and 4. Now, I'm in the editing phase, right? I haven't put in all my matrices yet, have I? I do not have to quit in this case because the calculator says, you told me you're going to edit, only go back to home screen when you're done editing. Am I done editing? I'm done editing A, but do I have B that I have to worry about yet as well? So I can go second and x to the -1. I make this mistake a lot. Let me show you what that mistake is so that you don't make it and get pissed at yourself either. If you go down to B, it all looks good. But when you go back to the edit column, the programming is automatically saying, go back and start at the top. So I can't tell you how many times I go down to B and then edit, and when I go to this screen, I'm actually editing A, and I end up having to type in again. You have to go horizontal first and then go vertical to be able to do the editing phase. It's a little bit picky out there. So 2 by 2, oh, and look at that. It just happens to have the same stuff in it that I used for the last class. So now I'm done editing. Oh, if you didn't put those values in, that's okay. Now, what do I want the calculator to do for me? I want it to do 2 times matrix B. So now I have to call matrix B into play. Here's where you're going to be careful about making sure you select the right matrix. And I want to subtract from that the matrix A. Does it generate the same values that I got by hand? That means that I didn't make a mistake because the calculator never makes a mistake. Only the person operating the calculator makes a mistake. So addition, subtraction. Not brain surgery, right? By hand or with the calculator, not brain surgery, right? Not too difficult. So how difficult would it be to do this last one down here? Do we need the calculator? Can we almost be done with this thing by the time we even put the matrices into the calculator? Sure. So I'm not saying you have to use the calculator. It's a tool. And if you feel better using it, when they don't tell you specifically to do it by hand, whatever floats your boat. Doesn't make a difference. Upper left-hand cell, without the word. 5 minus 4.
Bless you.
Bless you. 1. 1 minus a negative 3. 1 minus a negative 3 is really 1 plus 3. Yeah, so you were thinking that this minus sign was the subtraction symbol too. No, it brought its own minus sign. Be careful, because that's a very simple mistake that you could make if you get in a hurry doing it by hand. 3 minus 7. Very good. Negative 4. Negative 3 minus 5. Negative 3 minus a negative 5. Ooh, that's really the same thing as negative 3 plus 5. So, 2. Negative 2 minus a negative 3. Negative 2 minus a negative 3. Really negative 2 plus 3. 1. 2 minus a negative 1. Really 2 plus 1, and it should be a value of 3. I can do these by hand if I want. Addition, subtraction, walk in the park. Not a big deal of difficulty. But matrices can only be added when they are the same size. And then we add them by taking the values that are in corresponding cells. Upper lefts are added to upper lefts, upper middles, upper rights, and so on down the line. Multiplication,